church, it shakes the conscience of those who are meant to lead it. In a time when we hear constant talk about mercy, dialogue, openness, and inclusion, many faithful Catholics who remain devoted to the traditional liturgy feel abandoned, ignored, and pushed to the margins. Their tears and their voices rise up, but too often they are met with silence. This silence is not the silence of contemplation, nor the silence of prayer, but the silence of refusal, the silence of closed doors, the silence of being treated as though they do not exist. Among those who refuse to stay silent in the face of this injustice is a French layman, Christian Marwin. He is not a bishop, not a priest, not a cardinal. He is a simple Catholic, but also a man of courage and conviction. He is the president of the organizing committee of the great pilgrimage known as Summorum Pontificum, the gathering that for years has brought thousands of Catholics to Rome to show their love for the traditional Mass of the Roman Rite. On September 23rd, he gave an interview in which he spoke with a clarity and boldness that few dare to use today. His words were not filled with bitterness, but with truth. And the truth he proclaimed is this: Catholics attached to the traditional Mass are being excluded, silenced, and treated as if they were strangers in their own church. Marwin spoke of a contradiction so obvious that it cannot be ignored. On one side, there is constant preaching about dialogue, listening, and mutual understanding. These words are repeated again and again in official speeches and documents. They are praised as the very essence of Christian charity. But on the other side, in reality, those same principles seem to vanish when it comes to Catholics who hold the ancient liturgy. Instead of being welcomed, they are shut out. Instead of being heard, they are ignored. Instead of being respected, they are treated with suspicion or even hostility. For Marwin, this is not just an abstract idea. It is a lived experience, a painful reality that he has seen with his own eyes. He remembers a time when dialogue was possible. In the past, even when there were disagreements and tensions, at least there was the possibility of meeting with church authorities, of sitting down face to face, of speaking openly about concerns, hopes, and fears. It was never perfect, but it was real. It allowed the faithful who loved the traditional Mass to feel that they still had a place in the great family of the church. But today, that door has been slammed shut. Marwin described how, in the last 4 years, the hostility toward traditional Catholics has grown stronger and more determined. He did not hesitate to say that it looks like a plan, a deliberate strategy to silence and marginalize them. Letters are written, requests are made, visits are attempted, but all are met with silence. The faithful are told that those in power are too busy, too occupied, too overwhelmed to listen. Yet these excuses ring hollow. Because the truth is simpler and harsher, they simply do not want to listen. He put it in stark terms, words that pierce the heart. We are like orphans in the Roman dicasteries. Imagine being a child who longs to speak with his father, who longs to be guided, to be loved, to be heard, but the father closes the door and leaves the child standing outside. That is how thousands of Catholics feel today. They are talked about, criticized, and judged by people who never even take the time to know them personally. They are treated as objects of debate instead of living members of the body of Christ. This, according to Marwin, is the dramatic paradox of our time. The Church speaks more than ever about dialogue and inclusion, but in practice, it excludes one of its most faithful groups. Synods are organized, assemblies multiply, meetings are announced, but the faithful who attend the traditional Mass are almost never invited. They are left out, deliberately invisible. It is as though their very existence is an embarrassment. They are Catholics in full communion, baptized and faithful, yet they are pushed to the edges as though they were intruders. The Versailles Diocese provides a painful example. During a synodal assembly, many groups attached to the traditional Mass asked to participate. Their requests were not simply delayed or postponed. They were outright rejected. They were not allowed to enter. They were not allowed to speak. Their voices were silenced before they could even begin. For Marwin, this single episode is enough to fill an entire book. It is not only an insult to those Catholics, but a symbol of the larger injustice faced by traditional believers across the world. He says it plainly: dialogue today exists only with those who already agree. The leaders open their doors to those who share the same ideas, the same vision, the same spirit. But those who think differently, those who hold fast to tradition, are cast aside. It is not dialogue at all, it is a closed circle, a conversation that simply confirms decisions already made. This is why so many traditional Catholics feel betrayed. They hear the Church speak of mercy and fraternity, but in practice they are denied both. to understand why the present situation feels so painful for so many Catholics. Christian Marwan takes us back through history. He recalls a period in the life of the church when, even with difficulties and disagreements, there was still a real and concrete possibility of dialogue. From the year 1988 until 2019, Rome had established a special body called the Ecclesia Dei Commission. This commission was born in the aftermath of the dramatic events surrounding Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, who carried out episcopal consecrations without papal approval. The commission was meant as a bridge, a place where dialogue could continue and where those attached to the traditional liturgy could still find a voice. For decades, this commission represented a sign of hope. It was not a perfect solution, but it was a space. It was a doorway through which believers could walk and feel they were being treated as part of the family. Marwan remembers how, during those years, he was able to meet personally with many of the highest-ranking church officials responsible for worship and liturgy. He sat down with Cardinal Jorge Medina Esteves, with Cardinal Francis Arens, with Cardinal Antonio Cachazares, and later with Cardinal Robert Serra. These meetings were not always easy. They were sometimes filled with tension, disagreement, and misunderstanding. Yet even in those moments, there was dignity. There was respect. The faithful could speak, the authorities could respond, and even if the outcome was uncertain, there was at least a sense of being acknowledged. As Marwan himself explained, these encounters were living proof that the church had not abandoned its children, who loved the traditional Mass. They showed that, even in the midst of conflict, unity was still possible. But then came a turning point. With the retirement of Cardinal Robert Serra in 2021, everything seemed to change. The arrival of his successor, Cardinal Arthur Roche, marked the beginning of a new and more severe chapter. For Marwan, this shift was not just a change in personality. It was the sign of a deeper, programmatic closure. He described his many attempts to secure a meeting with Cardinal Roche. He wrote letters. He sent emails. He even went directly to the offices in Rome. And yet, every effort was met with silence. The answer he received was always the same. The cardinal is too busy. On the surface, this may sound like a normal response. After all, a man in such a position surely has many responsibilities. But for Marwan, it was more than just a busy schedule. It was a wall, a rubber wall, as he called it, placed deliberately to block any chance of true encounter. This was not the simple problem of a full calendar. It was a refusal to engage, a refusal to listen, a refusal to recognize the faithful as living members of the church. This, for Marwan, was not merely a personal disappointment. It was not about his own feelings. It was a wound inflicted on an entire community of believers. Thousands upon thousands of Catholics were made to feel like abandoned children, left without a shepherd to guide them, without a father to hear their voices. His image was powerful and heartbreaking. We are like orphans in the Roman dicasteries. Think about that for a moment. Children of the same family, baptized into the same faith, kneeling at the same altar, are made to feel like outsiders in their own home. They hear their pastors speak of openness, but they find only closed doors. They hear constant speeches about listening, but their cries vanish into silence. They hear promises of dialogue, but their presence is treated as an inconvenience. And yet, these faithful are not enemies of the church. They are not rebels plotting against unity. They are Catholics who love the Mass of their ancestors, who find in the ancient liturgy a wellspring of faith, reverence, and holiness. They are families raising their children in devotion. They are young people discovering beauty in sacred tradition. They are elderly men and women who have held onto the faith for decades. They are priests who labor quietly, celebrating with reverence what has been handed down through centuries. Marwan explains that in the past, even with disagreements, there was at least the chance to sit across the table from Rome's leaders. Now, however, there is no table, no seat, no invitation. Traditional Catholics are spoken about, but never spoken with. They are analyzed, judged, and even criticized from afar, but their voices are never truly heard. They are treated not as living persons, but as problems to be solved, as obstacles to be managed. This disconnection between the Church's official language and its actual practice is what makes the situation so dramatic. In documents, the word dialogue appears constantly. In speeches, leaders insist on inclusion, openness, and universal listening. But in daily reality, entire communities are shut out. It is as if the Church is holding a grand banquet of dialogue, but deliberately leaves certain children standing outside the door. The paradox is striking. At the very moment when dialogue is praised as essential to Christian charity, it becomes a privilege granted only to those who already agree with the dominant vision. For others, dialogue does not exist. Their voices are excluded, their questions unwelcome, their loyalty disregarded. This is why so many faithful feel a deep sense of injustice. They do not seek privilege. They do not demand control. They ask only for what the Church herself proclaims: dialogue, respect, and the recognition of their place in the body of Christ. They long for the chance to be heard, to share their love for the traditional Mass, and to be treated not as strangers, but as children of the same mother. Yet what they encounter instead is suspicion, sometimes even hostility. Those who are attached to the traditional liturgy often find themselves portrayed as obstacles, or worse, as enemies of unity. Their devotion is misunderstood, their fidelity twisted into accusations of division. But in truth, their love for the ancient rites springs not from rebellion, but from reverence, not from pride, but from humility before something greater than themselves. This contradiction wounds deeply. For many, the traditional Mass is not a hobby or a preference. It is the way they have encountered God's majesty, silence, and beauty. It is where their faith was nourished, their vocations discerned, their families strengthened. To dismiss this devotion as nostalgia is to deny the lived reality of countless souls who have found in the old rites the very heartbeat of their Christian life. The faithful do not ask that others abandon the Reformed liturgy. They do not call for division or rivalry. They ask only that their place at the banquet not be denied. Dialogue, if it is genuine, cannot exclude those who carry a different sensibility or spirituality within the same faith. True unity is not achieved by silencing diversity, but by allowing each member of the body to contribute the gifts they have received. When the Church speaks of dialogue but refuses to listen, it sends a painful message that dialogue is not a gift freely given, but a tool used selectively. Such a vision cannot sustain communion. It risks breeding resentment, discouragement, and even alienation. A mother cannot tell one child, "You are loved and welcomed," and then turn her face away from another. The paradox becomes sharper still when leaders insist that dialogue is a path of evangelization. How can the Church invite the world into open conversation if she is unwilling to do the same within her own household? How credible is the call to welcome strangers if her own sons and daughters are treated as outsiders? And yet, beneath the hurt and frustration, there remains hope. The faithful who love the traditional Mass do not give up easily, for they believe the liturgy itself carries a healing power. They continue to attend, to pray, to raise their children in the faith, and to trust that the truth of their devotion will one day be recognized. Their perseverance is itself a form of dialogue, a silent but eloquent witness that says, "We are here, we are faithful, and we belong."